Hey guys, welcome your souls and welcome your spirits back to another Default Cube CG Matter tutorial. And in this one, I'm going to be showing you how to make this material. You know, it's kind of like this sci-fi loopable cell thing. I don't know what I'm going to call it, until I name the video. So for now, we're just going to call it like sci-fi material. And to show you how this works, we're going to make this node network from scratch, completely procedural. And by the end of this video, hopefully you'll understand a bunch of tricks that let you make something like this, and some of the controls that this has, before we kind of blast off into math land, is we can control these, the size, the scale of these things. So here we have very big tiles. We can control the speed. So here it's going very fast. Here it's going very slow, kind of creeping like a snail. And I think we had it at 15 or 16. We can this tutorial is a train wreck. We can also control the color. So in this case, we have multiple colors since our color ramp has a lot going on. And then we can also control the emission. And one more thing before we get into it. This works with any object with a UV map. So torus, apply the material, looks great, and it acts just the same. Okay, so I'm going to start up a new scene, and let's get into it. So when you open up Blender, this is what you're going to see, unless you've modified the default startup scene. And all we need to do is go over to shading. And this is where we're going to be doing all our work. This works with Eevee. It also works with cycles. It also probably works with like a Lux render or whatever, but I'm going to be using Eevee. So first of all, how do we get cells on our cube? That's the first step before getting them to oscillate. Well, there's this age-old trick. It's actually pretty new when we started in 2.82 of adding a white noise node, because this node was only added in 2.82. We're going to connect this to the surface, and you probably can't see, but what the white noise does is it adds kind of like TV static to whatever object you apply it to. Right now, you're not going to see much going on. We got to add some texture coordinates, and I used Node Wrangler to do that quickly, but you can just add these manually. So now you can see we kind of have this TV static noise. Basically, every point infinitesimally small has some number between 0 and 1. That's basically what this is. Doesn't matter. How do we turn this into kind of cells? Well, the trick is you just add a Voronoi texture right there. And you can see it's already kind of doing the right thing, although it kind of looks more like stained glass instead of noise. So all we have to do is take the randomness and set it down to 0. And this kind of gives us a more grid-like structure, just checking that we're using UV coordinates. And so that's already the first step done. We can have a bunch of cells, any size really. And it might even make sense instead of letting us put in a random number here, like anything other than an integer, we might want to just constrain these to integers. So instead of just putting it in directly here, let's put the value via an external value node, and also math node set to, either round or floor or ceiling, anything to get it to be an integer. So now it's kind of more snappy. So I'm going to pick something like, I don't know, 47. 47 seems good. Okay, so now we have our cells, and the question is, how did I get this to be animated in a fairly loopable way? Well, I'm sure there's a bunch of ways to do it, but the way I've elected to do it is with the sine or the cosine function, because those are functions that are periodic in themselves. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Well, what we can do is we can start off with a value node, and I'm going to use some drivers to get this to animate over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click here, right-click, copy as a new driver, meaning we just kind of created a driver based off the information here, and then I'm just going to paste that driver. And you see, as we go frame by frame, this is just increasing, so frame 24 gives us 24 here. Frame 42 gives us 42, etc. So this is now kind of animated in some sense. And the original idea was I was going to take this, put it in the surface, use a math function set to either sine, cosine, even tangent. Let's do sine. And when you just play this, oh, by the way, epilepsy warning. Hopefully I didn't cause a seizure for anybody, but what this does is it gives us kind of this flashing thing as the sine goes from -1 to 1 to -1 to 1, etc. You don't really need to know the math behind this, but the point is we have these cells, we have this sine repeating thing. All we have to do is kind of combine them together in some fancy way. So first of all, I'm going to take this repeating sine thing and slow it down just a bit because it's flashing too fast. And we can do that by dividing our current frame number by 10, as if our timeline was playing 10 times slower. So now you see we have this kind of very nice and slow thing going on here. And to kind of combine these ideas together, all we have to do is add another math node, lots of math, set this one to add, and then we're just going to connect this in here. So instead of just having the frame number, we're taking the frame number and also adding, the noise that we have from before. And you can see that it kind of works, but it kind of all seems like it's moving together a bit too much. Like towards the end, they kind of seem to be going invisible at different speeds, but otherwise there's too much uniformity here. So what I'm going to do is just make the cell noise more intense. We're going to multiply. By something like 10, I guess is fine. And the higher you make this number, ideally, I think the more independently it will look like they act. And this is already kind of like the base of the material. We can already change the resolution in some sense, and also change the speed that everything happens in, like we talked about. So now the question is, what are the finishing touches? How do we make this look a bit cooler? Well, first of all, notice that there are some squares that remain black most of the time. If you like it the way it is, that's fine. Otherwise, you can just add an add, and if this is set to 0, we have the same thing from before, but otherwise, the higher we make this, kind of the brighter the texture or this procedural process is on average. I'm just going to get rid of it though. So what we need to do to make this look good now is I'm going to get rid of the background, or make it black really. And we're going to set this to be an emission, so it's glowing. And seems to not like not being directly into the surface. So we have our emission. We're going to enable bloom, so glows once we make this a bit brighter. And I guess another thing we can do is change the color with a color ramp node. So instead of feeding this black and white thing into the emission, we can feed something going from black to, some color like red, blue, teal, whatever you want. And another thing I would recommend doing is adding a diffuse BSDF, which we are going to add together. So we're basically creating a bit more of a complicated shader, and we'll have this BSDF be closer to black. Okay, cool. And again, like the trick that I talked about before, you can always add multiple colors to this. And this kind of gives it a very cool, varied look. So maybe we'll add multiple colors, make this one red. So now it's I don't even know what's going on anymore. Now it's just crazy. I think it would look cooler if it either sped up or slowed down. Probably more on the side of slowed down. Let's see what else. Make this a bit, I don't know. I don't even know what I like anymore. All these are fine options. I guess we we actually kind of already made the material. This was already the whole workflow. But one thing I want you to notice is that this, the whole thing kind of relies on these texture coordinates. And those texture coordinates are set to UV. Yeah, we could have used something like generated, which gives us pretty similar results, maybe a bit, scaled down, but that's fine. But since we're using UV coordinates, there's no reason you can't already make this work on, again, any object with a UV map. And of course, you're going to see a seam along here, along the head, because if we check out the UV map, you can see that there's a seam right here, which is where the head is kind of cut in two, I think is where it is. But we can also edit these UVs live to, do the whole thing. But I feel like you already understand what's going on here. So really the core idea is, creating these cells like we talked about, making it periodic with the sine function. Again, you could have used a cosine to get pretty much the same result, just displaced a bit by a factor of like 90 degrees in terms of time. It's kind of a weird thing to think about. Here's tangent to kind of give a different look, but yeah, you could just play around with this. It's very easy to make and very cool to play with, especially the color options. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I feel like it was a strange one. It wasn't in my normal narration style, but whatever. Anyways, if you enjoyed this tutorial and want to support, me and have the means to donate and everything, please do check out my Patreon. I appreciate every single one of you that has the means to do so and wants to. There's benefits, but other than that, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to end it right there. That's going to be my last thing. Oh, you guys have stuck around for the super secret ending. Only probably a couple of you actually made it here. I just wanted to announce that I know I have a ton of series underway. The animation nodes, the grease pencil, the shading nodes. I keep making mistakes by adding more series. Generally, they're all going to be continued, just not on a normal basis because I don't like sitting down and recording 10 tutorials about grease pencils. Horrible. Um, so yeah, sorry that I create it's a better viewing experience to watch, years from now when it's done. But right now I can understand why it's a bit weird. So I'm trying to make more of these videos that are just like project, teach you how to make it, done. But eventually more series videos.